Hello everyone, my name is Saurabh Agarwal from Informatica Cloud Product Management team, and today I'm gonna be talking about a very exciting feature which has been released as part of January 2020 Cloud Application Integration release. So let's get started. All of us are familiar with the process objects in Cloud App Integration. Cloud App Integration lets you define the complex data types using process objects. So process objects serve as a template or the metadata for a complex data type. And today in Cloud Application Integration, these are created manually by using the UI where you can define them. But over time, these objects can get very complex because they can have nested hierarchies, they can have many of those fields, and it becomes very difficult for anybody to create them. So as part of January 2020 release, we now offer creating process objects by importing either a schema definition or an interface document. So these schema definition, for example XSD, have a definition for a complex type and which we leverage. And similarly in the interface documents, for example a WSDL or a Swagger file which define the metadata definition for a service. These have elements and objects that are also very similar to a process object as they define the complex data type. So what users can do? Users can create multiple process objects in a single shot using the UI. As we will see, this UI is very friendly. It is very intuitive, gives you a lot of information. And by virtue of using this wizard or this UI, the process objects that you create can be nested and hierarchical. It all depends upon the schemas that you're importing from the files. Like I mentioned earlier, you can create process objects by importing schema definitions, for example XSD, or the interface documents, for example WSDL and Swagger, since these have the elements which qualify as a complex data type. In the future we might support more of these formats, but for now we support XSD, WSDL and Swagger. What more, you can provide these documents either as a URL, because most of the times they are available as a remote URL. They may also be available as a local file, and in case they are more than one, it will make sense to actually have them into a single zip file so that user need not perform this operation again and again. So we also support the zip format of importing process objects. These process objects, we understand, could be many given the fact that the XSDs or the WSDL or the Swagger that you import could have many such schema definitions. So we let the user tag them and we let them prefix it so that they can discern it easily from other process objects. And then these process objects, needless to say, can be used as a template for complex data types and shared across all the cloud app integration assets and not just scope within a specific asset. So we will follow this up with a demo, but before we move forward to the demo, I also want to give you some resources in this regard. So you can always refer to Informatica documentation, the links for which I mentioned here. This will give you more detail on a step-by-step process on how do you create process objects by importing the WSDL, Swagger or the XSD definitions. You can always reach out to the Cloud Application Integration community, which is a very vibrant community where you can seek answers for your queries. You can ask questions, you can search for content, and you can find content as per the relevance. With that said, let me show you how this feature works on a live setup. So now I'm gonna be logging into Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services. This is the login page. So let me log in. I have already created a project called Create Process Objects here, where I would be storing all the process objects after import. In order to access this feature, you have to go to the familiar New dialog and then go to Process Objects. You will see a new entry here called Process Object Creation Patterns, very similar to the way you can create service connectors. You will see there are two options available. You can create from WSDL or XSD, or you can create from Swagger. Now in our case, we are going to use a live WSDL file available from the Salesforce Marketing Cloud, formerly known as ExecTarget. and this opens up a friendly UI wizard which will take you through the steps of how do you perform this operation. So the first step is to select a source. As you would notice here, the source could either be a file or it could be multiple files which are zipped together, so it's a zip file, or it could be a URL. In our case, since we are going to be using a live WSDL, I'm going to be using the URL here and paste it here. This is the URL from the Salesforce Marketing Cloud WSDL. Doesn't require authentication, but in case you do require authentication, you can use the use authentication checkbox here and fill in the details. In our case, we don't require. Click on next, and at this point tool will figure out how many files are available within this URL which have the schema definitions, and that these files are supported or not. Looks like there are 2 such files available, and both of these are supported because it's WSDL or XSD, and both of them are valid, so they are supported file types. At every point you will find related logs. At this point there is no logs to display as we have not started the parsing procedure here, but at every point you will find them here, which you can also download using the download option here. So going back here, clicking on next, at this point you will get to know the schemas available within these files. So the first file has 345 complex types and the second one has 2. But given that we have so many complex types available, there is an option to either prefix them so that you can better discern them from other process objects, and tag them for better searchability. Given that this is coming from Salesforce, so I'm going to be using the prefix SFDC for both of these files, schemas, and I would be using Salesforce Marketing Cloud as a tag name for both of these schemas. Again, you can check the related logs here. It gives you information on how the things are working behind the scenes. So it converts the WSDL file to one schema resources, and you see those parts available here. Clicking on next, it's going to generate the objects. As you would notice, there were 347 overall objects that we found as part of these 2 files, and these objects were as per the names here, and the description is also provided. This is what would be filled in the process object. This is auto-generated, and that's what the description says here. It also details on how many fields are available within these process objects once they are created, and again you have an option to change the tag name if you want to, or you can customize a specific object name with a different tag or add additional tags here. So we'll keep them as is for now. But you can again look at the related logs here to see how the things worked out behind the scene. There were a bunch of warnings here, but more or less it looks like the things went through fine. So when we click on next, and at this point it will give you a summary of what's going to happen when we generate these process objects. So 347 process objects will be generated. They would be located in a specific project folder here. I'm going to change that so that we have better readability. I'm going to use the project create process objects. If at this point if I want to add additional tags to this, I can still do that. So let me try that. Let me just give a tag name called demo and start import. Now once it start import, it's going to take some time because we have many process objects to be created here. So you can choose to run this in the background by dismissing this dialog, or you can stay on this page and let this dialog finish. It's up to the user's choice. In my case, I'm going to dismiss it so I can continue doing my work and come back at a later stage to see if the process object generation has completed, which should be available here as part of the notification. As you would notice here, there's a new notification here which says that process object importing has been finished, and 347 process objects have been created successfully. That's a notification for me to go and check if all things went through fine. So I go into the create process object project here and look at the objects being created, and I do see there are 347 new objects being created. This folder was empty initially. So let's look at a couple of things here. as you would notice, we had used the prefix called sfdc. So all these objects have been prefixed with sfdc. There was a tag that we had used. We had used two tags. The first tag was Salesforce Marketing Cloud when we were creating it, and you see it here. And then second time we used the tag called demo. Let's look at one of the process object here. So let's look at sfdc asset. As you would notice, this is a complex process object which references other process objects here, and it's valid. And once that's been done, you can use these assets across your cloud application assets and start building complex integrations. Well, thank you so much. That's all I had for this video. Thanks for watching the video.